Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining Museum Hue today. We're so excited to share our new research and have a great conversation with our community today about what is going on with us. Good afternoon. Thank you everybody for dropping your names, your organizations, your pronouns, and where you're joining us in the chat. I don't want to take up too much time. I think we're starting off with a good group. It's good to see everyone. If you do not know me, my name is Brittany Bellinger. I'll do mine out loud. My name is Brittany Bellinger, pronoun she, they. I am the Director of Programs and Innovation here at Museum Hue, and I am so excited to kick us off tonight, this afternoon, and to see everyone joining us. It's been a while since we all met like this. So welcome. While everyone is getting to see each other and talk in the chat, I think we can just start. We can just get started. If anyone has not yet downloaded the report, you can see here that you can use the QR code to also get the report live and direct. It is free. It's nice to see everyone again. Thank you. All right, so we're going to actually start right now. And I just want to say hi again. I'm Brittany. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are going to do a few things, but first, I just wanted to welcome you into the space. We have a little bit of a welcome here that we're doing, just getting to know each other, see each other again. It's nice to see a lot of familiar names and a lot of support from our community. We'll talk a little bit about Museum Hue, where we have been, what we have going on, but of course, we'll be diving into our latest research report, which is what we're all here to talk about, the HueArts and Cultures Northeast report that just dropped a couple of weeks ago. We will have a conversation with some amazing cultural leaders who have not just supported the work that we've been doing, but also have been doing the work themselves at their own institutions. And we will also leave time for a Q&A. Anyone who has any questions about the report, the presentations, or the conversations you see today, feel free to drop your questions. We will be watching the chat very closely. I do want to say, for anyone who is looking for ASL interpretation or closed captioning, we have amazing ASL interpreters, Selena Flowers and Gabriel Gomez from Pro Bono ASL. We want to thank them for providing their services for us today. This may be new to anybody. This may not be new to anybody, but if you have no idea how to access our interpreters, you can go to the bottom of your screen, click that more button, and be able to, thank you, Adrian. Click that more button, and you should see this pop out. You can click American Sign Language and or the closed captionings, and you will see Selena and Gabriel pop out for you to help you join and follow along in this conversation. That's for anyone who needs it. Um, so feel free to turn that on right now. Okay. Oh, it's good to see people still joining. Anyone who is new and joining, still feel free to introduce yourself. We love to see who's in the room. So drop your name, your organization, your pronouns, and where you're joining in the chat. And for anyone who needs to, please use this time right now to turn on that closed captioning, or to pop out our ASL interpretation provided by Pro Bono ASL. Thank you so much. All right. So I want to thank you all so much for being here today with us. We're really excited to welcome you to this conversation as we celebrate the release of our latest research report, HueArts and Cultures Northeast. This gathering is an opportunity to reflect on the realities, challenges, and possibilities for arts and cultural institutions, resilience of these institutions, and the ongoing inequities they continue to navigate. And today is about bringing those insights into conversations with leaders who are doing this work every day. A few things that I want you all to keep in mind. This town hall is being recorded. So feel free to engage on camera if you would like, or in the chat. We love the one mic rule. So, because there are a lot of speakers today and a lot of good conversation, if you are not currently talking, please stay muted otherwise so that we can hear all of the great insights from all of the cultural leaders. Feel free to respect one another. There may be some touchy subjects that come up, but this is a safe space. And for everyone who is popping in, please feel free to rename yourself on Zoom with your name and arts entity so we know exactly who you are and where you're coming from, especially as we get into the conversation. So, this is a great time right now to do all of that. Again, for anyone new, introduce yourself in the chat. Feel free to click on the More button for closed captioning or an ASL interpreter if you need to. And we're just going to keep these community agreements in mind as we move forward with today. We're especially grateful today to be joined by members of our advisory committee, those whose perspectives and leadership have helped shape this research and continue to move the field forward. Right here, we have the cover of our Northeast report, which for anyone who has not yet downloaded it, you can use the QR code to download the report right now. Um, so we're excited to start this conversation and to dive into the research. But to begin, I'm super honored to introduce Stephanie Johnson-Cunningham, the co-founder and executive director of Museum Hue, who's going to walk us through our latest research and some of the key findings from the report.
Thank you so much, Brittany, and thank you all again for being here with us to learn more about Museum Hue's latest report, HueArts and Cultures Northeast. It has been such a labor of love for us to see this work, to expand this work as well has been such a blessing. So let's get into it. This work is inspired by the immense contributions and the ongoing perseverance of leaders at the helm of Black, Indigenous, Latino, Asian, and all culturally specific institutions of color across the country that we have encountered throughout our career. And it is my pleasure to share with you our research, our findings. So, this report investigates the unique histories, experiences, pedagogies, and practices of museums and cultural centers founded by what we call Hue institutions across all 11 northern states and one district. And so the guidance and experience from many of these institutions have been at the forefront of Museum Hue's founding. And so we're really excited that these institutions throughout the Northeast, again, have been a core part of the support for Museum Hue in general. And so on your screen now, we are looking at the map that we created, specifically looking at the 135 or so institutions that we were able to identify. So we're really thrilled about this. This map is available to the general public to view their locations and also make plans to visit these sites. So, while widely differing, these institutions are united in their commitment to advocacy, representation in the field, and racial equity in society at large. So, we created a clear criteria so that we had a full understanding of the institutions that we wanted to capture. So, criteria one, the organization's name and mission statement must include the term museum or cultural center or a similar word. The mission must also focus on Hue institutions. Again, that's what we're calling these institutions underneath this umbrella. And criteria three, the organization must be founded and led by someone from this community as well. Next slide. So we sought guidance and insights from an advisory committee of leaders at Hugh-centered museums and cultural centers about their work's impact overall, the importance of institution building to preserve their creative practices and cultural lifeways for their communities, and how an online footprint can be helpful. So we're really grateful to our advisory committee. They come from institutions from all across the Northeast, from New York all the way to Washington, D.C., and everywhere in between. Next slide. So, in the Hugh Arts and Cultures foreword by Dr. Lonnie Bunch, Secretary of the Smithsonian, it also provides an overall insight into the importance of this research and emphasizes the importance of these institutions. He highlights that museums of color have transformed the field in ways many still don't know, that there is a lack of accessible data and scholarship for the field to learn from these institutions, and that outside of collections, the documentation that's permanent are the books and articles we ourselves write. And fourth, that Museum Hugh's research addresses the gap and is a reservoir the sector can draw strength from to continue the fight, especially in the world we're in today. So, in his own words, he says, "What excites me about Museum Hugh's research is the opportunity to address a major gap in our field, that there's a need for more critical research and literature about African American museums and all other museums of color, that there's a striking lack of data, scholarship, and thought leadership of the groundbreaking work these institutions have already done. In museums, the only permanent things that are beyond the collection is the documentation we produce. So books and articles endure." Next slide. So again, we encourage you to take the time to download the report and read the foreword in its entirety, and to do a deep dive into the report, as we couldn't possibly cover it all today. But here we'll continue to show some more snapshots. So for our research, we took a mixed method approach, engaging Yancey Consulting to conduct and analyze qualitative research and Slover Lynette at NORC to design and implement a quantitative survey. So through the combined approaches, we queried a sample of Hugh leaders focused on the northeastern region of the United States in order to learn more about their organizations, collect and distill their stories, insights, and data. And as a result, the qualitative findings are organized through reflective essays, thought pieces from members of Yancey Consulting who conducted the interviews. These essays are supported and enhanced by graphs developed through the quantitative inquiry by Slover Lynette at NORC. So the qualitative segment gathered stories, experiences, and insights from 29 in-depth conversations with the leaders of these institutions, and the quantitative segment surfaced data from 45 organizational leaders that supported those spoken and lived experiences. 14 organizations participated in both segments of the research, and across both efforts, 60 unique organizations, over 44% of the identified 135 Hugh institutions have their experiences represented in the Hugh Arts and Cultures report. So in some states, more Hugh institutions existed than in others, and that absence was palpable. But Museum Hugh reached out to organizations identified through our research and referrals to participate in the project, and 30 responded in the time frame of this research to participate in the qualitative interviews, and 45 completed the surveys within the time allocated as well. So while each research segment yielded distinct findings through this report, Museum Hugh highlights the convergences among them, underscoring the importance of combining storytelling and data to effectively drive change in support of these organizations. So we sought to hear their origin stories, understand how these organizations operate and remain attuned to community needs, and listen to their hopes, needs, and yearnings for the future and for a digital platform. The underlying intent for our conversation was to make the invisible visible, that is, to uplift stories and needs and causes that are often left unsaid. So themes that came out of it was culture making is inherently tied to community. Innovation is in the DNA of people with histories of liberation and self-determination. And three, there is power in we. And then in finding essay one, Custodians of Culture, it highlights how the leaders of these institutions play a crucial role in the amplification of their cultural heritage through memory as well as through preservation, collecting meaning. These organizations are indelible and trusted sites created to provide consistent and authentic platforms for cultural representation, often in direct response to racial inequities and a need to broaden public understanding through art, history, and culture. Many institutions leverage best practices in collection care, scholarship, and operations. Others built new models in opposition to traditional or colonial museum practices. However, they all have long argued for recognition of their own cultural authority. Next. And finding essay number two, the cultural waterways, highlights how these institutions are living systems, not static buildings. They are moving, nourishing, and connecting, much like waterways, carrying memory, like rivers carry life. And it also highlights that culture is an ecosystem of channels of belonging created by keepers of tradition, protecting cultural memory and shaping civic life, not just creating arts programs. So, akin to rivers, museums and cultural centers founded and led by these Hue custodians in the United States have been and continue to be radical sources of physical and spiritual nourishment, collective placekeeping, and innovation. Each organization is a river in itself. It brings sustenance to its people and community. Next. So, similar to our qualitative approach, the quantitative approach taken by Slover Lynette at NORC through the survey highlights the organization's origins and structures, how they came to be, operational priorities, how they work, and future aspirations, what would help them as they continue to do their work. So each represents an area of focus that we wanted to uplift for each organization. And so when designing the survey and quantitative portion of this project, we recognize that the unique experiences of each of these organizations adds up to a collective shared experience that we wanted to understand. Next. So for the analysis, participating organizations were categorized by budget size, smaller budget and larger budget organizations. Now, we chose this framework because budget size is often a key determinant of an organization's capacity to scale operations, allocate resources, and implement strategies. This distinction enabled us to better identify different divergences in the organization's approaches, challenges, and outcomes, offering a more nuanced understanding of how budgets impact their origins, operations, and aspirations. We were mindful that, this dichotomizing in this way can be oversimplifying complex realities. However, we saw it as a tool for clarity and not a rigid categorization. So, for transparency, we did reach out to the full list of 135 institutions, as I mentioned before, and received 45 surveys representing 33% of the identified organizations. And so, although the sample of 45 organizations may not fully capture the full range of organizational perspectives and experiences, this report still offers meaningful insights into key trends and patterns. So, for example, when the organization's missions were examined through a coding analysis, 8 directions stood out in all of them, right? So, one, social justice and equity. Two, preservation of heritage and history. Three, celebration of diversity and representation. Four, community engagement and development. Five, cultural education and awareness. Six, advocacy and storytelling. Seven, legacy and intergenerational connection. And eight, empowerment through arts and culture. So both smaller and larger budget organizations identify their ability to share undertold or untold stories as their greatest strength overall. So we also know that many of these institutions began between 20 to 50 years ago, which the survey also reflected. It also highlights that most of the smaller budget organizations were founded less than 20 years ago. Also, again, we made sure the institutions fit under our criteria where the founders were from the Hue communities centered in this report. Next. So the survey also highlights some challenges that are not unique to these museums and cultural centers. Go back. Challenges such as financial stability, professional development for staff, having enough human resources such as staff, securing grants, and connecting with funders. The arts in general have struggled and continue to struggle under this environment, but we know that the underfunding of these Hue institutions are also at play here because of systemic racism. And we also know that these institutions, when compared to peer institutions, we see some inequities there as well. Next. But we know that there is strength in numbers. And so one of our goals for this initiative is to share this work far and wide, but most importantly, to continue to connect these entities. In our research, what we've learned is that in our advisory committee and in our interviews and sessions that we've done is that many leaders of these institutions didn't know each other. And so having the opportunity for folks to learn about each other's institutions and also possibly having conversations around, a deeper connection and deeper partnerships or collaborations and things like that are important. And we know the challenges in that as well. When you are at capacity, underfunded, again, things that are not necessarily unique to these institutions, but Museum Hue providing an opportunity for folks to know each other, to learn about each other's work, is also an important part of this work that we do, because we want to create a trusted social interactive space that feels like a gathering, and also creating a digital gathering ground that connects and anchors these institutions to one another as well, and also creating a connection between these cultural keepers. And we want to leverage the digital platform both to deepen peer connections and to cultivate support across a broad range of sectors as well. And also develop our own metrics. What we've learned in the conversations is giving more language and credibility to non-traditional metrics uncovered in the interview sessions, like indicators of belonging, community, practices, and care that is currently in the works at their institutions as well. So we are delving into that deeper. And so we are creating this digital gathering ground that we're really thrilled about, but definitely more on that at a later date. But Museum Hue, every time we create a report, we really work to create actions beyond just the report. So we're grateful for our funders, the Institute of Museums and Library Services, National Endowment for the Arts, and Mellon Foundation. Also grateful for Museum Hue's team and our partners at Yancey Consultant and Slover Lynette at NORC. Again, you can download the report and learn more by scanning the code. And also, please consider becoming a member and supporting our efforts and advocacy over the past 11 years. As I mentioned, we are continuing to create actions based on our reports. Some of you may be familiar with our HueArts leadership cohort that came out of our HueArts New York report and findings, creating paid professional development opportunities for staff at these institutions. Also, our HueArts docu-series, which we work to document these institutions through photography and videography. Much of those materials have been used to support these institutions in their fundraising efforts, board presentations, and social media presence. So these programs that came out of our HueArts New York report report, and we plan on continuing to take action in support of these institutions. And so, as I said, this is just a snapshot. We really hope that you take a really deep dive into our report because it reads like a love letter. Quite honestly, it is really digestible and a really great read. So again, please download it and share it with your colleagues. We would really appreciate that. And so, without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. Again, they are also a part of our advisory committee as well. So, I'd like to welcome Silvermoon LaRose, Jennifer Scott, Ivan Henderson, and Cynthia Wu. If each of you can just take a few minutes to just introduce yourselves, and then we'll jump into the conversation. And we'll start with Silvermoon.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute. Asquith Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Silvermoon LaRose. I am the Assistant Director at the Tomaquag Museum in Exeter, Rhode Island, tiniest little state. We are a separate nonprofit organization, not a tribal museum, so it allows us to be more reflective of the larger Indigenous community of the Southern New England region. Our museum largely focuses around these main areas. First and foremost, Indigenous empowerment. Everything that we do is for our community to create opportunities for them. So we actually have the Indigenous Empowerment Center as part of our museum that focuses around connecting Native people in our community to opportunities that help them to reach their individual goals. We also focus on educating the community at large, anyone who wants to learn about Indigenous peoples. So we do a lot of programming with all kinds of organizations, schools, institutions. Our educational program is open to everybody. And lastly, we're preserving the history and culture of our communities for future generations. It's our role to leave something for the generations that are coming after us to learn and engage with and feel empowered by. So that's largely what we are devoted to doing. It was important for an institution like ours to be a part of this work. Um, this research like this because as an independent nonprofit, some of our needs may differ from tribal museums that are funded through tribal organizations, are accessible to tribal grants. As we build a collective of information around the challenges, needs, and successes of culturally reflective institutions, it's important to diversify that collective, make sure that all voices are heard because we're not all coming from the same experiences as American Indian, Alaska Native led institutions. We're a community that is now living in a nation that has been colonized by a different collective. And so that new collective has replaced us in this space. It's important that we preserve our own information because no one else is going to do that for us. And there's nowhere else in the world that we can go where that's happening successfully, that we can see what a well invested effort looks like to preserving our culture. We have to build that here with others like us who are committed to that work. So, quick shout out to Kajet Solomon of RISD Museum, who referred us for participation in this project. Thank you so much.
And we'll kick it over to Jennifer.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces and names online. My name is Jennifer Scott. I am a curator, an anthropologist, a public historian who has, I've always had kind of a foot in academia and the other foot in arts and cultural spaces and museums for nearly 30 years now. And the current project, oh, I should say, I also tend to work mostly on museums or with museums intentionally that are elevating human rights and social justice and civil rights, and whether it's immigrant rights or women's rights or people of color. And my current project is called the Urban Civil Rights Museum in Harlem. It's a brand new history museum that we're working on that we are dedicated to opening this year, fingers crossed. It was started by the National Urban League, which I can tell you more about later. Our mission will be to interpret, document, and share stories of the long and ongoing struggle for justice and civil rights in northern urban environments across the U.S. So most of you know on this call that most, if not all, the museums, civil rights museums are in the South, and the South has been kind of carrying the burden of the story, but it's really a national story. And the stories of the North and people fleeing the South hasn't quite been told fully. So we're trying to focus on urban northern centers, and we start in the 1500s. We don't start with the modern civil rights movement, and we go all the way to the present, which is very challenging. But one of our hopes and goals is that people learn about this history, the long fight for justice and the long fight against injustice, which has not been linear, to think about how they can participate in the present and in the future to make real change. So really trying to connect history to present action intentionally. And, I think of this museum is directly connected to this topic of organizations run by people of color, because I think of a lot of Black museums, especially in other museums of color that emerged in the 60s as part of the Civil Rights Museum and as part of fighting early on these exclusions that we had in curricula and in arts and in culture, and telling the American and the global story. So it's super important to do these kinds of studies. I think elaborating on what Lonnie Bunch said, we don't know. I don't know that there's ever been a study like this out there, to be honest. And if there is, it hasn't been done in a long time, and definitely not in this moment of the 21st century, when so many people of color are actually coming into museums and arts and cultural space more than ever. And so we don't really know what's happening, especially in leadership positions. We don't know what difference is making. We know anecdotally, like Lonnie said, it's been changing the game. It's been changing the rules. It's been adding so much. And now these sorts of studies can help us to finally document it systematically, qualitatively and quantitatively, and produce more scholarship and data so that we can know what difference it makes and to really see the impact that these institutions of color have made in storytelling, approaches to curation, to educational, different, educational approaches, accessibility, to see our impact, but also our needs. We don't really know. We don't really know because we've never really looked at it. So I'm really grateful to Museum Hue for taking this chance and starting this. So I think it would help us much better to begin to understand how we can impact the world that we want to live in and to make the changes we want to see. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jennifer. Ivan?
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for having me. Great to see so many familiar folks here with us today. I'm Ivan Henderson, Executive Director at the Delaware Historical Society. I've been in this role for 3 years. For 1 year prior to that, in 2022, I was the director of the Jane and Littleton Mitchell Center for African American Heritage at the Delaware Historical Society. And so I started the survey in one role and finished it in another. I can let you know the Historical Society was founded in 1864 here in Wilmington, Delaware, with ambitions, for statewide coverage around history and the narratives that make Delaware what it is. We are composed of 9 buildings, mostly built in the 18th and 19th centuries, as well as our history museum is in a historic 20th century Woolworth building. Our research library as well in a 20th century bank with the vault and everything still standing. Um, the Mitchell Center for African American Heritage is a rarity amongst historical societies. It's not the only one, it's not the second one, but it is a space, a department that's obviously dedicated to understanding the African American narrative and those African American histories that are both overlaid and undergird so much of what we know about Delaware. Jane and Littleton Mitchell, the namesakes, Jane was a teacher, an artist, and activist, NAACP leader here in Delaware, and a revolutionary soldier. Littleton Mitchell, her husband, a Tuskegee Airman activist, NAACP leader, revolutionary soldier. Interesting that the physical space occupied by the center, the exhibition related to it, is at the rear of that Woolworths, where African Americans would not have been able to shop, or even in many cases enter through the front door, or sit at the counter for a milkshake. And so all those things factor into our thinking, the ironies, the recognition, finally by this historical society that these African American narratives are special. These histories are unique. They have been overlooked, and they need to be tracked. I tell you all that to say as well, I'm the first ever Black executive director of the Historical Society, of this historical society, and that's not my fault. I'm sure there was somebody qualified before me, but it's part of the narrative, and part of the special care I take in looking both at the Mitchell Center, but also the responsibility of the Historical Society in general, in a different way. I think this work is important, to echo what those before me have said, and what I'm sure our other guests will say. Agency in addressing our collective needs is one thing. It's enriching. It gives us strength. It emboldens us, and it seeds the next generation of people who will walk in our shoes, fill our shoes, and hold positions and have responsibility we can't imagine. But I also think we complete the story for those who have ignored it, who have been blind, or who have just decided that it wasn't valid. Actually, those histories that we celebrate in a year like this year are incomplete and don't even make sense without our narratives at the core, and as part of it. Delaware, U.S., and world histories are incomplete without focusing a trained eye on the stories and contributions of people of color, of all people. Now, while we traditionally privilege the interests of the few, the victors, and the ruling class, as well as the wealthy benefactors, we leave conspicuous vacancies in sharing the facts, the myths, and the traditions of the many, of the people who built the nation, shaped it, and applied and continue to apply the pressure to help it fulfill its ultimate promises to all citizens and people. So at the Delaware Historical Society, at the Mitchell Center for African American Heritage, we address silences in the collections. We seek reparative and restorative language and the data and metadata around the 3 million objects in our care. And we think about the generational triumphs and traumas of this first state, unique narratives that undergird the regional histories of civil rights, Black religious freedom. Some of the first Black churches started here, or those who started them came from here. It's about placemaking, and finally the evolution, of American culture and the arts, in particular, hard science and soft science. So again, I'm grateful to have worked with this team and contributed anything here, and looking forward to the conversation. Good to see you all.
Thank you, Ivan. Cynthia?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cynthia Wu. I'm here to talk about our work at HueArts Center in Boston's Chinatown. Um, we have a 5,000 square foot space located at the edge of Chinatown that once bel where families were once displaced. It's a historical significant piece of land in Chinatown, where in the 1950s, row houses and Chinese and Syrian families were forced to move. And this space was returned to the community through the development of a mixed-use housing unit, including space for community use, which became the HueArts Center 9 years ago. And it has now become an anchor at the edge of Chinatown to fight displacement in light of rapid gentrification that continues to impact all neighborhoods of China, many neighborhoods in Boston, including Chinatown, and returning it to a space of belonging and of community. So we opened 9 years ago, so we're much younger than a lot of some of the other organizations represented in the report, but we are really here to celebrate and uplift the stories from the Asian and Asian American community, both in Boston, Chinatown, and the New England broader region. And we also have a really unique model of how we operate because we're opened and founded by a social service agency, Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center, BCNC, and a local community college here in the area, Bunker Hill Community College. And really, our parent agency decided to collaborate with Bunker Hill, really representing the belief and investment that arts and culture are critical to our communities for Asians and immigrants to thrive here. So it's beyond just arts. We're all talking about the importance of arts, creating belonging, helping us preserve histories and identities, and really recognizing that recognizing that it needs to be part of everybody's lives, not just those who have access to them. So part of the reason that I was so excited to be invited and to participate in this study is because we are I like to say that me and my staff and the center, we're here to create community and create belonging with the people who come through our doors, right? And I'm thinking about the work. I've really enjoyed getting to know all these other organizations. Like, how do we come together and create community with each other, and see what each organization is doing? And I think this is a really exciting opportunity to see that, to read about the amazing work, find through lines of our work, hopefully seed potential partnerships, but also allow us to advocate for each other and move forward as a larger body. So thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. And again, thank you all. Now that brings me to my first question. This research highlights both resilience and ongoing inequities that your institutions face, that museums of color may have faced. From your perspective, what feels most urgent for people to understand about the reality of this work right now?
Well, I would just like to say that I think at this point in time, it's really important for us to make the case that museums and cultural institutions are not optional. When crisis hits, the focus tends to shift towards survival needs, food, health, housing, shelter. All of that is extremely important, but the preservation of arts and culture is also essential. There's a direct impact on our economy, a direct impact on the health and wellness of people in our community, a direct impact on our safety in these communities, and there's an influence on policy that gets created out of these spaces with these collectives that are built through our organizations that affect everything that is happening to us in this moment. So I really think we need to be looked at as more essential institutions.
I'll
Yeah.
go next. Oh,
No, go.
okay. Thanks, Simon. I just have two comments about that question. The first thing that comes to mind when Stephanie, when you ask about resilience and organizations of color, in spite of inequities, it just makes me think of how much work we do with so few resources. And it makes me long for the day, quite honestly, that we can actually, not be proud of doing so much with so little money. It's like made us into creative geniuses in some ways, a lot of the people who work in institutions of color, because you have to be so resourceful. But I feel like we have to get past that. We need more resources, definitely on all fronts. And the other thing that I think is sort of urgent, related to what Silvermoon was saying, is about the pipeline, because I think that we have to, I love this idea, that arts and cultural museums are not optional. And I feel like as the people who make the difference, it shouldn't be a choice of a job where you're making a sacrifice. It should be a way to make a decent living, to have a decent job that you love and that you're paid a human wage for. And when I was growing up, I didn't know this could be a job that you could have, that could sustain you. And I think now that we have so many more people of color coming into museums, it's an opportunity to learn from the alternative ways that we've been approaching, that the studies revealing that we've been approaching museums to actually create a training and a pipeline that people aren't necessarily getting through all the museum studies programs. I mean, there's so many more museum studies programs. I've taught in a couple of them, and they, in general, they teach you to kind of be a generalist, but I'm not sure they're equipping people of color in the way that we need to do the work in museums. And I think that's an opportunity for us from what we learned from how this work is done and the way we've been doing it, for decades. So I'll stop.
No, thank you for that, Jennifer. And to your point, so look, I typed a couple of answers here, but to one of the things you were just saying, right? Um, Understanding that this is a viable, profession, I think is hugely important. I'm an alumnus of Bank Street College of Education, their leadership and museum education program, and the, great program. The one complaint I had, and I told everybody after 2 years, was that most of our professors and guest professors were women, and more than half of them, like 75%, started out their presentation by saying, "I can do this work because my husband's rich." And I'm telling you, my first fall there, I had a baby on the way. And I was like, all right, so and my husband's not rich, I'm not, you know what I mean? Like I'm not married to some rich man, and so just understanding how to make this work for me was important. I think about the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance's study released right after the pandemic, where they make the case for the economic impact of institutions like ours, both institutions of color, but also cultural institutions in general, and how those numbers and that data can make a difference in how we articulate our case. And so, to answer your question, Stephanie, what do people need to understand? The first thing I wrote is it is difficult. It takes dynamic decision making. We're called upon to improve our toolkits that we have to use to justify work. We're in a soft science arena in an era where other priorities, as others have said, are and seem more important, and they may be. However, our institutions contribute to the long-term healing, the understanding, and real-time critical thinking needed for individuals, families, and communities to navigate these times and make the essential connections that help them conceive of better futures. I honestly believe that. And so the long game, ironically, is our most urgent work. We got to hurry up and be patient, but also stay the course with what we know is the right thing to do. We facilitate learning in ways that manifest change at unpredictable intervals, but which have been proven to push change over time. We are necessary much more than we are nice, and we have to be perceived as both. And I'll stop there.
Cynthia, see you unmuted. Did you unmute?
Oh, yeah, I'm having trouble. No, I just want to echo what the same threads that my thoughts were on this was the impact of not having arts is beyond just lack of arts access. Our work is so interconnected with other domains like youth development, public health, the economy, that if we don't continue to invest not only in the arts but also cultural institutions or organizations that are representing communities of color, like where will our voices be like down the line, long term, you know? Yes, definitely more necessary than nice, and investing in voices and perspectives of communities of colors is we need to continue to do that. Otherwise, the voices will continue to be less to diminish.
Yeah, totally. And so looking ahead, what would real investment in museums of color look like to you, not just in dollars, in trust, visibility, long-term support, et cetera, et cetera?
It's hard not to consider dollars because, as you shared at the very beginning in the snapshot, I think it was like 72% of our organizations, the smaller organizations, that was significant need for us. I think it was a little bit less for larger institutions, but it was still at the top of their list. And when we think of investment in our communities, it's investing where we have need as opposed to directing what people are willing to invest in. And so, in some cases, that means we're going to need to learn how to fund ourselves, especially in a climate like this. We need to build our own philanthropy. We had this conversation a little bit on Tuesday. It really got me thinking about it and looking into it. And when I looked into the data for a community like mine, Indigenous communities, less than 1% of philanthropic giving goes to Native organizations. So we're already getting a very tiny piece to do this work with. So it means we're going to have to invest in ourselves, which means we need to raise another generation of givers within our community. And in a community that has very large, you know, a very large percent of our population is battling poverty, we may not have finances to give, but we have other skills and we have other things that we can contribute. So it's looking at expanding what we all bring to the table and can put in, what connections we may hold. The people that we're meeting and interacting with every day, they may have skills that they can direct to our organizations to help us move forward. We need things like help with human resources. We usually can't afford to hire someone to do that work. We can never afford someone to do technology and cybersecurity and things of that nature for our organizations. As we're doing fund development, having the expertise of people who know how to reach donors in amounts that can set that up for us. And sometimes we get gifts we don't really know what to do with. When we were gifted the start of an endowment, it's having the people with the expertise to know how to leverage that well for our long-term stability. So there's so many other ways that people can contribute, and we need to start looking at those connections as well.
Well, first of all, I totally agree that money, we always see money and it's central to so much of, what we can do and we can't do. But also that we need to think about new models of that kind of investment, financial investment. And particularly, we had talked about this earlier, what kind of investment that we're getting so that we don't mimic or fall into these sort of neo-colonial relationships. I think that a lot of the unconscious bias that pervades this country and the world and embedded ideas of racism that people have against different groups and different individuals, I feel like that gets translated to institutions of color as well. And so often we are characterized not just as under-resourced, but as deficit or failing or, stereotypes. There's all these assumptions about there's no expertise present, that there's just all sort of these negative ideas that are kind of embedded in the fabric and the ideologies, particularly of American society, but I think it goes far beyond. And so as people are investing, how can they balance, the investment with acknowledging the expertise that's present so they don't kind of relate to what you were saying, Silvermoon, just so they don't sort of require you to do things that you already done or you don't need help with, so that it's actually really effective help in the areas that you actually need help, and to get past those assumptions about what you're able to do, incompetencies and competencies, without really, seeing us and having a conversation. I think there's a lot of work to be done in trying to think about models that don't have so many restrictions on, and that trust us more, frankly, to do the work that we're doing. I know this sounds counter to the pipeline comment I made, but there's a lot of highly, highly skilled people of color in this field now because we've had to be. And so I think it's a time that's acknowledged and honored through investment.
Yeah, I'll jump in and yes, yes, and yes, right, to both of your comments. Um, I agree. Look, Delaware, Silvermoon, I'm competing with you for maybe the next smallest state or something. Delaware is, three counties, a little over 1 million people. Folks literally have my cell phone number. It's crazy. I don't know how they get it. But there's a personal touch. and an attention that's necessary here and that I enjoy. I'm not from here, but I enjoy it. We work outside of our buildings and get to all three of those counties. Make sure people across the state in a number of ways, feel engaged with new opportunities to tell their stories, help us collect their evidence or collect their own evidence and protect their assets. But for me, it's communal investment, right? Because I echo all your sentiments around money, and it seems like it's all I think about these days. But I also came up in a household where it was part of my mother's values to make sure that these institutions were used, that we hit the turnstile, and that we made demands of them. And so I'm not saying it's entirely on the folks that we serve, yet at the same time, making sure that we can focus on the emerging needs and interests of learning communities in the 21st century, can concede more communal investment. And again, we're in USA 250, America 250. And I like to tell folks, I worked at the African American Museum in Philadelphia, which was opened on Juneteenth in 1976, so during the bicentennial. And I was born, 8 months later. So I like to think I was a bun in the oven, right? And to Jennifer's point, there's more of me in the field now than there was at the bicentennial as we look at 250. And so there's an opportunity here to rely on that time and treasure from our broader community, both and their talents, to support the institution and to look for new models. And this is the part I wrote around strategic partnerships, even shared back office functions, which I've seen before in Philadelphia. We enjoy an exceptionally high per capita number of lay historians, interested community members, and families connected closely to their lineages and legacies here. It's pushed us to create new platforms for them to share their passion for history and its importance, as well as the development of arts in this region. And so their engagement and the pressure they put on us to remain relevant is part of the active life we have to track and prove to funders and would-be supporters. And so as we learn to tell that story better, and use evergreen language to do it, because we understand that, certain words we can't even write in grant applications anymore. Those innovations, along with a nimble mindset and not over relying on any one or any narrow, range of sources of funding, or our way forward, or at least that's, the approach I've been taking, and we're making a little bit of good noise with that approach here in Delaware.
Awesome. Cynthia?
Uh, to talk from a little something that hasn't been mentioned much. Ivan, you talked about partnerships. So when I think about how we can talk about sustainability for the arts, and I think the Art Center, Power Art Center is very uniquely positioned that we're part of social service agency. So we have that built-in infrastructure, right, to reach out and work with the youth programs team to think about how arts can connect with youth development, or work with our family services team to think about like new parents or new immigrants, and how art and therapy, artistic, not art therapy, but more like therapeutic art practices can help bring community together. So I'm continually looking at that, like within our partners and our spheres, like how do we work with the community development organization in my neighborhood? How do we work with the land trust that's working with preservation? How do I work with Main Streets? And I think in the short 9 years, like the feedback we've gotten is that we have such a stronger, and this actually goes back to the pipeline, we have a stronger arts pipeline. Artists are more familiar with working in this community, and after they leave the Power Art Center, they can then partner with other organizations and do that work without us. Like we don't have to be the holder. We can just be the, help them, give a platform, and then get connected with other local organization, neighborhood organizations. So changing that value of how arts is used, like directly with other community-based organizations in my neighborhood, is how I kind of think about slowly bringing and uplifting the value of arts, which then, they can come back to me, another organization, and say, we have a project, we want to partner with you. Like I'm not always reaching out to be like, how can art support your practices and the community right now? but it's a two-way relational, we have that relational dialogue where people can easily come to me, and even from a different sector, um, you know, I want to work with artists. I want to work, you have the expertise. So that's how I think about like expand. It still connects to finances, right? How are you financing your work? How are you paying artists? But trying to broaden, maybe looking outside of the usual pathways, or hoping to continue to look beyond the usual pathways to stretch where that kind of support and infrastructure can that we can connect to.
Well, with the interest of time, I'm going to ask one final question. And just to wrap it back to why we're here, introducing this new report, if each of you can just briefly share what you hope that HueArts and Cultures accomplishes for these institutions, your institutions, and the many others identified in this report.
All right, I'll go and I'll be quick. I'm going to read this. Again, thank you, Stephanie, for leading this. And it's in many ways, you're putting out a report, and this is only the beginning, right, of the impact of this information. This work gives us the collective voice, the mirror, and a lens that can help us improve our service individually and as a sector of cultural institutions. We do not have to guess and remember lessons for our individual institutions when we decide to meticulously collect data and insight from our field. We don't have to guess. We don't have to remember anymore. We can have better guidance in our guesses, our risks, and the interpretation of past experiences, at the very least, and in our hopes, a lot more. We need to develop what I mentioned before, what I call evergreen strategies and language to ensure the longevity of our cherished institutions, or to know when aspects of their missions reach obsolescence or require thoughtful redirection. This is about our fun seeking, our teaching, our arenas for engagement, and our ultimate impact on and necessity in the lives of people we serve. And so I do hope that HueArts and Cultures report gives folks an on-ramp into that discourse and give them some of the tools and also the authorization to move forward and continue to develop things that we've never seen before.
I think I probably said what I hoped for earlier, but I'll just kind of say it quickly. I think this is a great beginning for Museum Hue to be leading us to build this community of practice where we can exchange ideas, resources in the ways that we're doing things differently, and also work together to produce this data, this scholarship, this documentation of this process, which is, it's missing a systematic documentation, so we don't reinvent the wheel, and we can improve upon all that we're doing, and also have evidence of the value that's being added to the field, that's transforming the field, frankly. There's a way to sort of communicate and brainstorm about that, but also I think potentially to collectively work towards that documentation. It's really important.
My hope is very simple. Even with this conversation and preparing, I really want to talk to everybody, like way more in depth. I would like a future where we have virtual lunches sometimes and we can just brainstorm and connect. Very simple.
I think that's a simple but beautiful hope as we make these connections. I want to give Jennifer her stars for the very empowering thought that she left with me just today. And when you said, there's a lot of skilled people in our communities right now. We have everything we need to get everything that we need. And a program like Hue bringing us all together to share those resources, to support one another. There's an opportunity in that collective opportunity for shared fundraising, for shared advocacy, for sharing of our resources and expertise, for sharing of our marketing efforts, to lift each other up, and even in our strategic planning. So there's so much power in the collective. And that's what's really exciting about seeing this work to come together in such a diverse way. So thank you.
Thank you all so much again for your expertise and your brilliance. We have a few more minutes for a question or two if anyone had a question. But again, I want to thank our panelists, Cynthia, Jennifer, Silvermoon, and Ivan for your time today, but also your time over the past year or two with working as an advisory member, and to all the advisors present and those who may not be here today. So deeply appreciative of everyone who's committed so much of their time and energy and brilliance to this work. Just want to shout out everyone who's just been so amazing. So thank you all so much. I see someone's hand raised that's on my screen, and I
Mhm.
think Brittany's actually leading this portion. So I'm actually gonna mute. And again, thank you all so much for being here with us.
Similar to what Esther has done, if you want to ask your question in the chat or come off mic, raise your hand in that order or drop your question in the chat. So, Esther, what's your question?
I have a question that also is a statement, so hopefully I have enough space for that. Thank you so much for this presentation. One of your board members had actually told us to log on, a couple of me, my friends, and I worked finance in a lot of institutions, arts and culture, and different large organizations throughout New York City, particularly. And as I'm listening in, especially a person that sees the number side a lot of like where's funding not going, where money is going. I'm just trying to understand as a person that's also working in like the workforce development of the idea of noticing that a lot of these our institutes are requiring 6 to 10, 15 years of experience in this space, but the salaries don't always match what they're requesting for these experiences. And there is a curating of youth that I don't see that usually is happening of the next generation coming in and pipelining as a person that started seeing and working in institutions and seeing their, people who used to donate a lot no longer donating. And there's this intergenerational kind of gap of where now we have people like friends like mine that are in mid 30s, well over six figures, not investing in our institute because they don't feel like things were ever curated or there was a pipeline of them becoming a person that used this institute and then wants to donate from there. And then with thinking about how the most unemployed demographic is 16 to 24, but we're not pipelining those jobs for those pays when we have students that are going into Target or retailing and not finding your institutes as a place to start their workforce and build infrastructure for the next year and become donors and all those other things. So I'm just trying to understand maybe where the gaps I'm missing with that work sometimes happening in institutes as a person watching it on the finance side of like, why aren't some of our donors in the 30s or 40s that are giving monthly? Where is that disconnect is happening and how can we not just circularly talk about it, but actually put those actions so that these institutes can actually survive longer and continue getting that support in those spaces? Sorry, I just need to make sure it was a full comprehensive thought and question.
Thank you for sharing, Esther. Does anyone of the speakers want to take that?
I'll touch on part of it because it's active. In Delaware, I serve on the Heritage Commission, which is run through the State House through Legislative Hall, and we're drafting legislation to establish an African American Heritage Commission to ensure sort of that some long-term work will be legally backed by the state and funded. One of the things that we wrote into the legislation that wasn't our first thought was involving students in perpetuity, students from Delaware State University, our historically Black college here, for that very reason, that whether they become historians or they are supporters of cultural institutions or they're legislators, that there's an opportunity for them now to understand what it takes to protect our institutions and tie us together statewide. So I think there's broader lessons for the region and for the sector, but there's something we're working on now, recognizing that same thing.
And, I think when we run these institutions, we get to make those decisions on who is eligible to work in what capacity for us. And at our institution, we don't require a specific background in order to work here. We're looking for the best people who have a desire to bring what they have here to share. My background was in health and human services. I was a counselor. I don't know anything about museums. I learned all of that on the job because my community invested in me here. And we do that with youth here. We have a full, there's so many young people from high school right through college, interns and fellows. We're constantly building opportunities for them and paid opportunities whenever possible. We have met students from the high schools that come and do their internships here, volunteer work here. We're constantly trying to build that pipeline, particularly for our young people, because we require that our educators be from our communities. They need to be native to be able to speak about our experiences from a first person perspective. If we want them to do this work, we need to teach them and empower them early. So we do. We got little kids working in here. Nobody heard that for laws, labor laws, but we let them come and they work with us and they volunteer and they feel like this is a home to them. We can build those inclusive spaces. Would we love to be able to pay everybody a livable wage? Absolutely. That takes the investment in our communities. And working at this organization for 10 years, I've seen places be handed dollars that are not doing half of what we're doing. And people are willing to give them everything because they just think they know what to do with it. While we were turning filing folders inside out and only using pencil on them so we could erase to reuse materials, we really just need people to know that and to prove that our impact is equally of importance and is worth sustaining.
I, oops, sorry.
Absolutely.
Oh, is this, I totally agree with Silvermoon and I love, hearing all the great work that you're doing. And it reminds me of how much organizations of color do this, like people end up learning on the job, on our jobs to do it, but it puts a tremendous burden on institutions of color. And I think this is the promise of this work too, that there can be something more institutionalized for us that works, that shows, that a special kind of training that's like customized for the kind of work that we're doing. So the burden is not so much on us because we already have so many burdens. Anyway, I also just wanted to comment on the question, which is like, so I think we could have a whole nother session on the question and the gaps. That would be so interesting and to brainstorm and think through. I don't have any of those answers. I just have suspicions, especially about the donor question. And one of the things that comes to mind, like why people are not donating, is I feel like, even people of color, we are socialized to invest a lot of times in only things that they think are already successful. And then success is just defined in a certain sort of more traditional way. So I would love for people to just take more chances and again, believe more in us and believe in the vision, even if it's not visible at the moment. I mean, I say that as we're building a brand new museum that doesn't exist totally yet, but we're building it. It's just a lot of what we can see, we can only see as, we're working together. But it's important to help support realize, these aspirations, I think.
Definitely. We are out of time. It's 4:52. So if there's any more, just a quick comment or question from the comments, we can probably get to, but I think we are grateful again for everyone's participation and presence today. And thank you all again for joining us. We are again encouraging everyone to download our report, to sign up for Museum Hue's newsletter and become a member, to stay in touch with everything that we're doing, again, on social media, on our newsletter. There's so much in store that we hope that you will be a part of in the near future. So again, thank you all. And also special shout out to Kemi Ilasanmi, who's here with us, who was a part of the initial HueArts report and partner with us. Also Omar Eaton Martinez, who is also an advisory member, and so many people. So thank you all so much for being here. Again, a lot of familiar faces. I see also some of our former and current fellows. It's really great to see again you all. Also some new faces. Welcome, welcome. Thank you all so much for being here and for being in community with us. As I've shared, there's so much happening at Museum Hue, and we hope that you will stay in tune for all that is to come. So everyone, thank you, and everyone enjoy your evening. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Take care, everyone.